out, and in going through the books, we found out that the country gave them $5 billion plus, much more than that, actually. And we're having it out with them, and let's see what happens. I think we have a very good, well, it's a very sad case. It's a case we win. We can't lose that case because we have the right to make grants. We're not going to make any grants like that. But I don't think Harvard's been acting very nicely. I think Columbia wants to get to the bottom of the problem. They've acted very well. And there are other institutions, too, that are acting, but Harvard's trying to be a big shot. And all that happens is every 3 days we find another $100 million that was given. 2 days ago, we found $200 million more. The money's given to them like gravy. I'd like to see the money go to trade schools, where people learn how to fix motors and engines, where people learn how to build rocket ships, because, you know, somebody has to build those rocket ships.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see trade schools set up, because you could take $5 billion plus hundreds of billions more, which is what's spent.
Absolutely.
And you could have the greatest trade school system anywhere in the world. And that's what we need to build his rockets and robots and things that he's doing, and to build lots of other things. And, you know, I went to school with people. In some cases, they weren't good students, but they could fix the engine of a car better than anybody I've ever seen. They could take it apart blindfolded. They had an ability at that. And they did very well. They made a lot of money. You know, it's a very skilled job. It's great. But I'd like to see a lot of money going into trade schools. I've always felt that. And we probably found our pot of gold, and that's what's been wasted at places like Harvard. And the money's been wasted. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask quickly, Mr. Musk, is your eye okay? What happened to your dry? I noticed there's a juice there.
Well, it wasn't. I wasn't anywhere near France, so. But no,
I didn't notice
about the
First Lady of France.
getting slapped, you know.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, no, I was just horsing around with Lil X, and I said, "Go ahead, punch me in the face," and he did. Turns out, even a 5-year-old punching you in the face actually does.
That was X that did it?
Yeah,
X could do it. If you knew X,
He's with his mom right now. But I didn't really feel much at the time, and then I guess it bruises up. But I just horsing around with the kids.
I didn't
basically.
notice it, actually.
I know that you try to stay pretty neutral because not your war, but
And by the way, not my war. I just want to solve the problem for people. This was not a war that was going to happen if I were president.
right. And so not your war, but as you try to fix it, and as you survey this hellscape of the Ukrainian front lines,
It's horrible.
and you and your team deal with a very stubborn Vladimir Putin. Do you
And Zelensky.
Yeah.
But do you look at this
Very stubborn
conflict
Zelensky, too.
any differently now? Like, do you look at this and see Putin as the good guy or the bad guy?
So I've known him very well. And I went through a lot of things with him because Russia was, you know, the Russia hoax turned out to be a total hoax. New York Times, they got a Pulitzer Prize. They have to give back the Pulitzer Prize. That's my lawsuit. And they're doing very poorly in that lawsuit. But, you know, they wrote stories about how it was true and it was false. And, you know, a lot of Washington Post also. I have gotten to see things that I was very surprised at. Rockets being shot into cities like Kiev during a negotiation that I felt was maybe very close to ending. We were going to solve a problem, and then all of a sudden rockets got shot into a couple of cities and people died. I saw things that I was surprised at. So, and I don't like being surprised. So I'm very disappointed in that way. With that being said, I'd like to see it end. 5,000 people, I think the number's even more than that, but 5,000 people a week are being killed. Mostly soldiers, but also people that live in little cities and towns throughout Ukraine. And I'd like to see that stop.
And I asked Caroline this yesterday, but I want to ask you directly. So many of the things that you're trying to do are held up in court right now.
Yeah.
If the courts are going to have so much influence over U.S. policy, do you wish you would have just become a judge instead?
Yeah, well, look, it wasn't meant to be that way. If you look at the founders, the president had certain powers, and you have your three groups, and they all had supposed to be pretty equal powers. But you can't have a judge in Boston running foreign policy in places all over the country because he's got a liberal bent or he's a radical left person. That's what the executive branch is for, and you have checks and balances. But we had millions of people pour into our country, many, many criminals poured into our country, murderers, mental institutions from all over the world being emptied out into our country. And if we don't get them out and get them out quickly, could lose your country very easily. This is a bad, that anybody would allow this to happen to our country. You know, with all of the things, we took over inflation, we took over some wars, we took over a lot of problems that didn't exist when I was president. None of it existed. We wiped out ISIS. Other than that, we had no wars. Putin was never going to hit Ukraine. Israel would have never been attacked. That attack, as you know, Iran had no money. They didn't have money for Hamas. They didn't have money for Hezbollah. They had no money whatsoever. That wasn't going to happen. All of these things that happened weren't going to happen. You wouldn't have had inflation. So it's very sad when I came back. But the thing that is the hardest is that they allowed 21 million people into our country. And many of those people are stone cold criminals. They moved their criminal population into the United States. And of all the things that, you know, are bad, I solved inflation, I believe, already. I got the fuel prices down. The fuel prices came down. That's one of the reasons they screwed up the energy. They screwed up the cost of gasoline and oil and gas. And you had tremendous inflation. The greatest inflation probably in the history of our country under Biden. And when people said, oh, but the economy was, no, the economy was terrible for the people because they couldn't afford the energy. And the energy brought everything else up. Energy is the big deal. But with all of that, we solved that already. In 4 months, we solved it. $1.99, $1.98 gasoline. First time people have seen that in a long time since my term. But the hardest thing to solve is millions of people pouring into our country, many of whom are criminals. Because remember, these countries are smart. Their leaders are very street smart. They're sending the people that they don't want. They don't want the people that are there, that are law-abiding, that are productive, that are working hard. They want people that are in jails. We have them. They allow them to come in. And I always look to the other side, like, why would somebody do something? You know, in business, I try and study, why would they want to do this? Why would they want to sell it? Why would they want to buy it? One thing I can't figure out is, what would an administration, what were they thinking when they allowed millions of people from prisons all over the world, not just from South America, Venezuela, all over the world, from the Congo in Africa, hundreds of people, thousands of people from the Congo, rough prisoners, from Asia, from Europe, rough parts of Europe. Why would they allow them to come into our country? Why would they do that? It's the one thing I can't figure out. And I don't believe it was Joe Biden. I really don't. I mean, look, he's been a sort of a moderate person over his lifetime, not a smart person, but somewhat vicious person, I will say. If you feel sorry for him, don't feel so sorry because he's vicious. What he did with his political opponent and all of the people that he hurt a lot of people, Biden. And so I really don't feel sorry for him. But he wasn't a person that would allow murderers to come into our country. He wasn't a person that was in favor of transgender for anybody that wanted it, take kids out of families, et cetera, et cetera. So I just don't understand why a thing like this, how a thing like this could have been allowed to happen. Very sad. It's very sad for our country.
If I could add something to that, which is, I think the fundamental moral flaw of the left is empathy for the criminals and not empathy for the victims. Empathy for the criminals, but not empathy for the victims. And there's been way too much of that. That needs to stop. To the president's point, there's been immense judicial overreach that is unconstitutional. That was never intended. And it's undermining the people's faith in the legal system. It needs to stop. It's gone too far.
And just today, we had, just a couple of hours ago, we had a great decision from the Supreme Court, thank goodness, that was very important. We had two important decisions yesterday on the tariffs because, again, we have to be able to fight a fair fight with other countries. Howard, would you say? We have to be able to, use tariffs to fight people that use tariffs on us. I mean, if we didn't have that power of tariffs, we would economically be destroyed as a country. We find out government's a little nasty on occasion. Hello, Peter.
Yeah, at times.
Hello, President Trump.
Government's a little bit nasty, Peter. You haven't noticed that. You've had a charmed life, right?
You tell me.
Very charmed. I think you've had a charmed life. I think what I'll do, if you don't mind, numbers have just come out which are rather extraordinary, and I thought I'd play a tape of one of the people who I've respected over the years, from Joe Kiernan and Rick Santelli. This just came out, and we'll just play that for a second.
Personal income is up 0.8%. That is almost triple the expectations. I'll tell you that the income numbers, really, for the first 4 months of the year, they're stellar. They're really stellar. I mean, I could go back and look at the first 4 months of many different years. Really very strong numbers, and you're right. This administration is criticized for just about everything under the sun. I've never, ever in my lifetime had glimpses into the politics of an administration in the form of transparency like this one. Why don't we be, give credit where credit is due? Income really shooting up.
Rick, I also thought everybody was going to get one last order of imports that were going to be tariffed, and they were loading up on things. How the hell they already fix the trade, or not fix it, but to cut it in half? That's crazy. So there wasn't a lot of front loading of things that they needed before the tariffs hit.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it really does call into question some of the conventional wisdoms. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next month when we get this number, or we see some of the other numbers like current accounts, see how they fared. Because I don't know, I've been watching these numbers a long time. I don't think I've ever seen the trade deficit cut in half in 1 month.
Not bad. Right? Not bad.
Come on, guys.
Yeah. I see Howard and Scott are here, so it's great. You guys want to stand over here? You might as well. You're the ones that help produce those numbers, and it'll only get better. The tariffs are so important, and that's why we were so happy with the decision yesterday where the tariffs continue, because without the tariffs, our nation would be imperiled. We would really be imperiled. I think I can say that with great surety, Scott and Howard. And so we were very happy to get that decision, that big decision yesterday. And today it's about a man named Elon, and he's one of the greatest business leaders and innovators the world has ever produced. He stepped forward to put his very great talents into the service of our nation, and we appreciate it. And I just want to say that Elon has worked tirelessly helping lead the most sweeping and consequential government reform program in generations. And the kinds of things that he's found and his people have found. He's brought a group of very smart people in, and they found things that are pretty unbelievable. I have to say that the numbers that we're talking about are substantial, but they're going to be very much more substantial with time, because many of the things that will